The points that I want to touch on was this individual speaks with obvious hate towards the raza. Um, he's a black supremacist, and he's educated in his history. And it's dangerous when someone's educated and their followers are the type that want to be told something rather than want to learn something, because if you want to learn something, you'll hear something and say, you know what, I'm going to read up on that. I'm going to look into that. That's what an intelligent person does. But this black supremacist is able to speak half-truths. But as the old saying goes, a half-truth is a whole lie, right? And we have to keep that in mind. And one of the things that this individual has said repeatedly, is that all of Latin America owes their freedoms to the Africans. And I'm not going to speak to everyone, every country, but specifically he mentioned how Mexico owes their freedom and independence to Gaspar Yanga. Okay, so Gaspar Yanga, we all know that in Veracruz and that area, there are a lot of people with of African descent. A lot of the slaves that came through, there was 200,000, estimated 200,000 slaves, African slaves brought into Mexico. And a lot of them ended up in Veracruz. And this is where Gaspar Yanga was, right? Now, when Gaspar Yanga came and was brought with the Spaniards, he fought side by side with the Spaniards against my ancestors, against the indigenous people. Okay, it's a fact. And eventually, Gaspar Yanga and a large group of slaves escaped. And when they escaped, they went into Veracruz. And due to the terrain, they were able to exist, right, on their own. And part of that existence, though, was they would raid the Spanish caravans that would be bringing stuff from the coast back into the Valley of Mexico. And they did that for a long time, right? And the Spaniards got tired of it, and so they sent about 500 troops into Veracruz to go in and put down this revolt, and reclaim this area, right? And during this battle, this black supremacist says that Cinco de Mayo was actually because of Gaspar Yanga. This person doesn't understand that Mexico doesn't give a fuck about Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo is an American, it's an American thing. It's done over here. It's promoted by beer companies and companies that make party supplies, because it's just an excuse for us to get down and party, right? But in Mexico, that is not, Cinco de Mayo is not a big thing. So let's get that straight. Now, getting back to the battle, when this thing was coming to head, Gaspar Yanga was not a fighter anymore. Gaspar Yanga was an old man, too old to be in battle, but he was smart. He was still smart. But listen to this. This is the truth. And remember, you can always Google this stuff. You can always fact check and do that, especially when you hear somebody speaking from a point of hate. So, as the Spaniards were going and heading into his area, he had Spaniards that he had captured, and he gave them a message and released them to go meet these Spaniards. And the message was, we are asking you for the same agreement that you have with the Indians, meaning if you leave us alone, we will pay tribute to you, right? And if the Indians rise up against the Spaniards, we will fight with them by side with you to put down the indigenous people. That was his agreement. But the main thing after that he put in was that if any other African slaves escaped from anyone else and came to his territory, he would return those slaves. Keep that in mind, right? When somebody says you owe your independence, but this dude's main plan was, I'm gonna look out for my crew. Fuck these indigenous people. We'll fight side by side with you Spaniards to destroy these people, the true people of the Americas. And any Africans that escape that aren't from my crew, we're going to make sure you get them back. Now, initially, the Spaniards rejected that. And so a battle ensued. And it kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It was a stalemate because the Spaniards were getting attacked from every side. You got to remember, during the conquest, the Spaniards did not decimate the Mexica and their allies. It was the smallpox. It was the disease that they brought decimated a lot of the majority of the seasoned warriors. On top of that, the Spaniards were able to convince over 200,000 indigenous to side with them and promise them all these freedoms. And then when they helped the Spaniards destroy the Mexica and their allies, the Spaniards then pitted everyone against each other. And that's this inferiority complex that I talk about has been bred into us. And the reason why we talk about he's not really Mexican, he can't speak Spanish, that dude's not as Mexican as me, and it's something that was bred into us. But Gaspar Yanga and his little colony, his palenque, whatever you want to call it, they did resist, and they got that treaty signed that they would help the Spaniards against the indigenous. Now, they didn't stick to it eventually because the indigenous they were whooping ass everywhere they could, And to this day, Gaspar Yanga is considered someone who helped the liberation. I'm not trying to take that from him, but I'm trying to put things in perspective. He was a piece of something that was huge. And to say that there's one piece freed people that he was actually responsible for massacring is a bit strange. One other thing I will touch on is whether it's a white or a black supremacist. When they tell any raza to go back to where they came from, this black supremacist called Gil attacked Gil. Gil fought back, and I feel he did a great job. But he called him a foreigner. He said, "You talking shit to me, and you're a foreigner." And that's the thing is, people want to be educated when it suits their point, and ignorant when it doesn't. Everyone knows California is Mexican territory, and before that, it was our indigenous land. We descend from the people that were the original inhabitants of all of the Americas. Okay? The conquerors came and they put invisible lines and said, this is a new country. But to our ancestors, that was never the case, right? And we descend from them. And so to say that we're foreigners on a land where we can date our people back tens of thousands of years is funny. Everyone else came on a boat. We didn't. We were already here, and we're still here. We never left. And when we look at the lands where our ancestors, where they once ruled, look at our population, how it's increasing. And so, there's so much that I could say, but I want to keep this short. I want to get this out to you guys. And I just want to remind people, I don't give a fuck if hey, whatever your beliefs are, make sure they're yours and not somebody else's. Make sure if you're listening to somebody and they say something, if you don't really know about it, fact check it. Draw your own conclusions. Especially if it's coming from someone who's speaking from a biased point and a hateful point. That I'm out.